everyone who signed up and who's here. This class is geared towards the audience that is familiar with a PODS 6 or a PODS Spatial, a previous version of PODS, and maybe is thinking about going to PODS 7. If you have any questions, feel free to email me afterwards, and with that, we'll get started. So it'll be a quick slide deck followed by a demo in APR. So first we'll go over terms. We'll go over the Centerline workflow for PODS 7, what's changed structurally in PODS 7, some APR requirements, and then a demo. And you're probably thinking, why are we going over APR if we're talking about PODS 7? And we will go over that. Stay with me. It'll all make sense in the end. So first of all, in PODS 7, we have feature classes called calibration points. PODS 6 or PODS Spatial, these are known as station points or control points in previous PODS versions. Calibration points in PODS 7 is really a combination of the two. So they're standalone point geometries or features used to store route measures. I like to think of these as points of inflection or standalone vertices. So if you look on your screen at the presentation, I have a line here at the bottom, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices. So typically what I would do is create 5 calibration points. Now you'll notice there's an asterisk here, and I'll explain as we keep going through the presentation why I have an asterisk here. When you use certain tools like APR, it handles a little differently, but we'll go over that in a minute. Again, in PODS 7, you have calibration points, which you can think of as just standalone points on your line that you have one at the beginning, one at the end, and then probably a few in between, and probably they'll match your vertices, or maybe they won't if you're using APR. You also have a center line. There is no feature, this is a feature class, there is no center line. No, this table doesn't really exist in previous PODS versions. It is a polyline feature class, and it stores geometry only. It does not have measures. So how do we know if your line has measures? Well, what you do is you'll double click on your line. You'll go to editor. If you're in ArcMap or even Pro, imagine you have a center line on your map, and you double click on it, and you go to create features, and then you'll see the vertices like you do down here on my screen. And if you look at sketch properties there on the right, you see an M column. That tells you that your line has M values, measures. So this particular line starts at 0, and where the red point is, it's 76.88 feet, right? So this line is 76.88 feet long. If this line were in your Centerline feature class in PODS, you would not see an M value. All you would see is a center line. Imagine just creating a polyline feature class on your map with no measured values, okay? Continuous station network is known as the route in previous PODS versions. It is also a feature class in PODS 7. It is M-aware, meaning, again, the line has measures. It's a polyline feature class. It represents your routes. It always ascends or descends, just as measures do on a line. It does not work like stationing. It works like measures. And think of this as the parent to the series. In previous PODS versions, you had route and you had series, and route was the parent, and series was the child. So now in PODS 7, continuous station measure is the parent. Engineering station network is the child. And again, in previous PODS measures, this was known as your series. And it is a feature class. It's also M-aware, and you can use stationing on this. So if you had stationing ahead, stationing back, this is where you would put that information in your engineering station network. And then lastly, we have pipeline, which is a feature table in PODS 7. It is not a feature class. It is just a table, and it just provides information about the line. So let me depict this a little better. Hold on. Go. All right, so this is what I just said is depicted here. So we have our center line. I don't know if you can probably, can they see my mouse? I think they can see my mouse. So here you have a center line, which is, again, it has no M values. It's just a feature class. Like if you were to create a feature class in ArcMap or Pro and not give it M values, maybe only give it X, Y, or something, this is what you have here. Then you have your engineering station network feature class, which behaves like a child, right? So in this case, we have 2 engineering station networks, 2 routes with calibration points. Those are these orange circles. And then the parent to that is a continuous station network, right? The way you would edit this, if you implement this, the way you edit you have, you're going to be using APR to edit, and the first thing you're going to edit is your center line. So to move any vertices, to change the center line, if I wanted to create a different, or edit the center line to create a different shape, I would first do it in center line, and then engineering station, and the tools automatically update continuous station network. And then you can see the pipeline table has pipeline name, pipeline order, operation status. Is it regulated? Is it piggable? Does it have a route? All this information is in your pipeline table. If you're familiar with PODS Spatial, think of this as line loop. Okay. It'll probably make more sense once I start the demo. So what's changed structurally in PODS 7 from PODS 6? So PODS 6, if you recall, you had a line, a route, a series, a station point, and you had to join all those to create your line geographically, to see your line geographically, right? In PODS 7, engineering station network is already a feature class. So you just pull up this layer and you already see your center line on your map. Again, PODS 6, you would join all these different tables, and yeah, I guess they would be tables because it's relational. You would join all these tables, and then in order to see your line geographically, again, in PODS 7, it's just, you just pull up engineering station network. The other big change is that in PODS 6, everything must be associated with a route, right? So everything that you put in your database had to have a route ID or had to be connected to the route somehow. In PODS 7, that's no longer, you don't have to associate everything with a route. You have these site tables where you can put information, and they don't have to be associated with a route. So if you have a meter station, a well pad, a launcher receiver station where you have to draw the line and put the flanges and all that, you can do in these site tables and not associate it with the route. So that's a second major change. And then the third major change is that in PODS 6, you had to use linear referencing. When you implemented PODS 6, you had to use linear referencing, meaning your lines had to have measures. In PODS 7, you don't have to do that. You can have coordinates only. And the way it would work is that you would use mainly the Centerline feature class. Remember, I mentioned earlier their Centerline feature class does not have M values, right? It's just geometry. And then you would also have your pipeline table. You would fill that out. Pipeline is just a table, remember? So you'd fill out the Centerline feature class, the pipeline table, and then you would load events. Imagine that you created a GDB and you created a GDB with a feature class called Centerline or pipeline, and then you created some events like valves, T's, anything like that, and then you're gonna populate your Centerline feature class or line feature class, and then you're going to load your valves and all that in the other tables. And again, you don't have to worry about measures or linear referencing. Now we know that in pipeline, the pipeline world, this is this is not, I mean, usually we will have stationing. It's kind of hard sometimes to get away from stationing. So if you do use stationing, then you're going to use linear referencing. And right now, currently, the only tool out there for PODS 7 to manage this these workflows to manage your loading of center lines and events is APR, our GIS pipeline referencing tools. So this is why you saw in the agenda that we were going to talk about APR. And you're probably wondering, why are we talking about APR when we're talking about PODS 7? This is why. Because if you implement PODS 7 and you want to use linear referencing right now, you must use APR. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the APR requirements. So APR will populate, whether you like it or not, continuous and engineering station network. Even if you decide that the two are going to look exactly the same, which you can do, APR is going to populate both of them. It's also going to populate your center line and calibration points. And then it's going to populate a table called Centerline sequence. And once we do the demo, I'll show you how all that is connected. The method to input geometry depends on how you receive the data. So in our demo here today, we're going to give you an example of how to load routes, how to append routes, and how to create a route. So depending on which method you use, or how you receive the data will depend on which method you use. The lines and values must match the calibration points. So remember I told you if you double clicked on the line, you go to editor, you start an edit session, you double click on a line, and you see your vertices and what measures they have. And here's on the bottom, here's a chart. These M values here must match the calibration point measures. So if this line is 76.88 feet long, you have to have a calibration point at 0, and you have to have a calibration point at 76.88 feet. And you can also have another calibration point at 19 feet, at 20 feet, and at 22 feet. You can do that. And just hold on for the demo, and I'll show you how this works. Lastly, you must fill these fields out here in order for all of this to work. So you have to have a from date. Usually when you load a line, your from date is captured in the database. Well, I take that back. You have to fill in the from date. But what you want to use is the date that you put that line in the database. And this is very important. If you try to load some events with a from date that's previous to your from date on the center line, it's not going to let you. It's going to create a duplicate. It's going to create duplicate data. Okay, so that's really important. And you have to have a from date. And all of this is located in your engineering station network. Again, let me show it to you live. You have to have a network route name. You have to have a network route ID, which is populated by APR. You have to have a parent network ID, which ties back to your continuous station network. You have to have a pipeline name, and you have to have a pipeline ID. So all of these, again, you'll find in your engineering station network. And then you'll find some of these in different tables. And let me show you that. Just bear with me. So I'm going to do a demo right now, and we're going to load a line. We're going to append a line. We're going to create a line. We're going to edit a line, and we're just going to touch very briefly on Centerline events. So with that, let me go to the demo. The first thing we're going to do is load a line. And you can still see my screen, right? Can everyone see my screen?
I can see your screen, yes, thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're here. This is the PODS 7 data model. It's loaded into SDE. And we're going to go down to this PODS.LRS. Once we install APR in your desktop, you can see this. We're going to right-click on the engineering station network, and we're going to load a route. Now, what I did was that I created I created these 3 lines just to show you what we're about to do. All right, so when I right-click and I go to load routes, it's going to ask me what I want to load. And 1 second, I'm going to go to that file that I created. I'm going to go backwards, engineering station network 3. And it automatically populates everything. Unique ID APR is going to populate that itself. So once all of this checks out, I made it match for simplicity. So all of this is going to match already. I don't have to match anything. So I'm going to hit OK. Not all fields in the network class are mapped. That's fine. Parent network route ID is not mapped. That's fine. I'm going to proceed. And just stay with me. I'll show you what it looks like once it's loaded. So it's processing the route. Remember, all we're doing right now is loading a route. Next, we're going to append a route, and then we're going to create a route. So this is processing, loading a route. It's telling me what do I want to do with the calibration points. I want to start at 0. It's going to input the calibration points for me. So I'm going to hit OK. And just give it a second. Everything's good. We're going to hit done. Do you wish to remove? I'm going to say no. I don't know. I said yes yesterday and nothing didn't seem to do anything. All right. So when I go to my engineering station network, I'm going to remove this query I have. Wait 1 second. Run slow from here. Okay, I know why. Let me refresh this. Now let me open it back up. Okay, here's the line I just loaded, pipeline 3. And I'm going to single this out. So the line that we just loaded in our catalog is here now. You can see it in Pro. You can see it in your engineering station network. Notice that it filled out a unique ID. It filled out a from date. I actually filled that out, a from date. It filled out a status. It filled out, it automatically filled out who created it, when it was last edited, who is it created, who created it, what user last edited it. It's telling us that this is engineering station network. Okay, so it's filled out a pipeline ID. Actually, I filled that out. When I loaded the data, I already had this in there. So notice that it did not fill out a parent network ID, which is fine, because we told it that that was okay, if you remember. I'm just going to hit the plus sign here and fill out an ID. What I want you to take away from this, once it processes, Oh my gosh. Can you still, can everyone still hear me?
I can hear you, thank you. Do you need to plug in
Yeah.
your laptop?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, 1 second. I'm plugging it in right now.
There are questions that have come in and we'll take them at the end. Some you may have clarified, but we'll go over them again just to assure that everybody has their questions answered. Thank you.
1 second, I just plugged in the laptop. One second. Sorry about that. I thought this had more battery life. It's always plugged in. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Can everyone see my screen now?
I can see it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. So sorry about that. I thought this had more battery life. Anyways, what I want you to get from this is that this unique ID in Engineering Station Network is the network route ID and calibration point. This is how they're connected. I'm going to just paste. I just copied and pasted this ID in the network, the unique ID in the Engineering Station Network, creating a query to just show me that ID in network route ID. What's wrong with the expression? Network route ID. All right. Why is it failing? Failure to access. I don't know if this thing is acting up because I'm in a conference room or what. Not a, well, okay, so anyways, this unique ID in Engineering Station Network is the network route ID and calibration point. I don't even know if I can open these fields to show you. So calibration point here, all the fields. Here's the network route ID. So that is where that would get pasted. And if I zoom into this line on the map, will it let me? It will have a calibration point. It will have two calibration points, one at the beginning and one at the end. And however long this line is it will be the end calibration point. So that is one way of loading the line. Now, we're not finished yet. Once we load this line, we have to go over here to your location referencing. You have to go over here to your location referencing toolbar, and you're going to generate a route. I'm pulling that up right now. So when you generate a route, you'll just pull in your engineering station network selected that you want to generate the route for, and you'll click run. And what it will do is create that route in your continuous measure network. And your continuous measure network is going to create this ID. The unique ID there is going to be the parent network route ID. That right now it's not letting me create. Maybe because I'm in a conference room and it's not liking it. I'm not docked. I don't know. So it's this parent network ID is going to be the unique ID in your continuous measured network. Okay, anyways. And they're all going to have, except for calibration point, they're all going to have a pipeline ID, this pipeline ID. And this pipeline ID is going to be your unique ID in your pipeline table. Open that up. Now this APR does not fill this in, so I would have to fill this in manually. And I would fill this in manually. I would add all this information, and then it would be there. This pipeline ID is really important because all of your events along this line have a pipeline ID. They also have a network route ID, which again is your unique ID in your engineering station network. So I would say that the two most important IDs here are your unique ID in your engineering station network and your pipeline ID in your engineering station network. Everything is connected with those two IDs. Okay. Now, once I add my route, once I generate the routes here, it'll tell me it's fine, it generated successfully. And then I'll go into my continuous measure network, and then I have to populate a unique, no, not a unique ID. I have to populate the pipeline ID, and then I have to also populate a network route name. I do this every single day, and I have no idea why it's not working. As a matter of fact, let me just exit out of it and try to come back in. Let's see if that works.
Patricia, I want to say even the most seasoned Esri veterans and those that work within Esri say, you know, when it comes to a live demo, I either hate it or avoid it at all costs because this happens sometimes. So we're patient with you. We totally understand.
So sorry. I should have stayed at my workstation and done this. It has something to do with me moving this computer. It acts really funny. After I move it, like I can't log in from home unless I restart it. I don't know, it's kind of funny here. Yeah. So here's my pipeline. And see, I don't know why this is. As my PODS training version. It's not showing me any data at all. Oh, maybe that's why. See if it shows it now. Okay, here it is. If I go to create date and sort descending, it should show me, okay, here it is, yes. So all I had to do was restart it. Okay, so here are the 2 points. Let me zoom to this. Here's that line that I just loaded in our catalog. And then you can barely see it here, but there are 2 calibration points. Right. So here are the two calibration points. Again, this line, here's the unique ID in the engineering station network, 1E9. Let's remember the first three. If I go to my calibration point here, here are the 2 points. I'm highlighting it. If I go here to the right, 1E9, there's my network ID. Okay, so that's how they connect. All right, and then if I go to my calibration point measure, I have a 0 and 130.55. This line is 130.55 feet. I'm just going to hit begin route and end route here and hope to God it doesn't shut down on me. Come on. Let me save. 1 second. Save. All right, so now that I have my route, my line in here, this line is only in Centerline and engineering station network. This line right now is not in continuous measure network. To do that, to put it into continuous, I'm going to generate a route like I've mentioned earlier. All right, so since I already have this line highlighted in here, I'm going to move it here, and then I'm going to hit run, and it's going to populate continuous measure network. And the takeaway again here is the way that these two connect. And actually, it's not going to error out. And it's going to error out because I did not put a parent network route ID. I have to do that first. This parent network route ID is going to be the unique ID in the continuous measure network.
Patricia, we had a question come in that's related. Could some of these steps that you just went over, could they be grouped into a workflow? And that was asked by Tori Metz.
Yes, yes, they can be. Yes, this is just like any pro, you can create models from it. You can, yes, create a workflow from it. I've created workflows for these steps as well. So yes, yes, you can. So again, if I go into continuous, then well, if I refresh it, I should see the one that was just created.
Another question related, if we load multiple center lines every time, do we need to load the parent network route ID manually? Is there any other automatic option?
You know, I think that it would load it automatically, and I just started loading routes this way. I was appending all the routes. So like this week is when I started doing this. So I'm still not sure why, because if you look at my, in my, how I organize the data in order to load it, this is populated, see, parent network ID. So I don't know, I'm not sure why it's not picking up, but I don't think that you would have to add it in manually every time. But what you do have to do manually is go into, once you generate routes, you have to go into this continuous station network, and you have to add the pipeline ID, and you have to add the network route name. So that you do have to do manually. So we'll load that in. So anyways, this thing is running slow right now, probably because I'm in a conference room. So let me move on to the second thing I wanted to show you was just appending routes. So if we go to our location referencing tools, which is APR, and we append a route, this is what that's going to look like. Let me choose my route that I'm going to append. You might do this if you receive survey data from the field and you want the route to look exactly like the survey data. One thing I have noticed is that when I load routes, for some reason, it gives it a different length. The line doesn't match. I have to always fix that. So I have to go in and edit the last calibration point. And then it calibrates the whole line. But if I compare it to my survey data, the vertice has a different, each vertex has a slightly different measure than what APR calibrates, or than what APR, the measure that APR gives it. So, wrong one. So if you want to load routes and you want it to look exactly like the route that you receive from survey, then maybe you want to append a route, right? So the first one we loaded a route, it's going to be slightly different. The begin measure and the end measure is going to be the same. In between here, it's going to be just slightly different than what you received from survey, I've noticed. Again, even projecting the data and all that, I noticed it's slightly different. If I append a route, it's going to be exactly the same, but I also have to append the calibration points. So I'm going to append the route. I'm going to choose, let me make sure I chose the right one. Want to load pipeline one. So I created these 3 lines here for this exercise. So engineering station 1, since I formatted it to match, everything matches already. So I'll just hit run to append the route. And it'll add the route just like it added this one. But again, it'll match my vertices, the measures on those will match exactly as the measures from survey. Does that make sense? Any questions while we're appending this route? So once I append the route, then I'm going to append the vertices append the calibration points. And the way I do that is just the simple append tool. So the first one, again, if you get a route from the field, let's say, and you have, maybe you get a KMZ or something, format it, put all your IDs in there, then load the route. APR will create the 2 calibration points at the beginning and the end. You'll make sure everything's correct. Maybe you have to edit the last calibration point. You'll have to go into continuous measure and update the pipeline ID, the network route ID after you generate routes, and you're done, right? If you want to append the route, like if you want it to look exactly like what you got in the field, then you might want to append the route. I want you to notice that once I append the route, here it is. Here's the route I just appended. Notice there are no calibration points. Why? Because I create them and I load them. And I do that with the append tool. And that's not an APR tool. It's just a regular append tool from Pro. Okay, so I click here and I just load the events, and the target's going to be calibration point. And then again, I generate my routes and it'll load to continuous. Okay. For the sake of time, so we have questions, I'll move on to creating. And it's the same to create a route in APR. You're going to use the edit. You're going to create your centerline. Remember the slide that I showed you? You always edit first your centerline. You're editing centerline, and then everything else starts kind of falling into place, if you will. So you'll create a center line. You'll go into your location referencing toolbar. You'll select the center line, and then you'll hit create. And then it'll ask you again for that start date, which is very important. We'll choose the start date is the day that you put that route in here. You'll choose your route name, pipeline, I think it's 2. I'll just use the same line name, 2. I'll tell it to calculate the measure. No, I won't. Choose a center line. It'll calculate the measure for me. I'll fill this in. I'll hit run, and then it creates the calibration point for me. Okay. So for the sake of time, I just won't finish this. Oh, maybe I can just finish it really quick. I'll hit run, and then it will see how it created the calibration points. So the main point is for every line, you have to have calibration points, whether it's 2, 10, 1,000, you have to have calibration points, particularly at the beginning, at the end. The way that it's all tied together, you have to have your unique ID from your engineering station network, which in other layers is known as the network route ID. And you have to have your pipeline ID, which is the unique ID in your pipeline table. And then you're ready to load events. And for the events, again, this is what you need. So again, 3 ways to load lines. You can load routes using our catalog. That's not an option in Pro. You can append routes if you want it to look exactly like you received it from your contractor, or you can create a route like I just did, digitize a route or something. The first one, loading routes, and the last one, creating routes, APR will create these calibration points. With appending routes, you have to create them. And any questions? So again, why did we go? Oh, go ahead.
I'm monitoring, and I don't see any new questions that have come in. Thank you.
That's either a really good thing or a really bad thing. And I'm thinking, I don't know, that it is kind of confusing here. But let's see, if you ask me what the main difference is between PODS 7 and the previous PODS versions, that what I showed you is really what I consider to be the meat of the difference. Like this is, for me, this is the main difference. What I showed you with APR is how everything is connected, how you would load a line with APR and how everything is connected. And why am I doing an APR demo? Because when you load PODS 7 and you want to use linear referencing, your only tool out there at the moment is APR. If you choose not to use linear referencing, you don't have to use this engineering station network or continuous. You just populate your center line, which has no M values, right? And then you can use calibration points if you want, but mainly your center line and your pipeline, and then you load the events. So, any questions? Any questions on how any of this is connected?
Let's see, we have something that came in from Chad. Table containing a definition of a pipeline. Pipeline is analogous to the line or the line loop tables in previous pipeline data models. Pipeline is defined as either logical, does not have a child network route feature, but may have child pipeline records, or physical, has child network route features and does not have child pipeline records. And this is from the data dictionary. So I think what we're getting here is some clarifying information.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
You know, there is a lot here, and we are recording this. And so it will be put out on PODS website, and we'll also send it directly to you. Hopefully in advance of sending it to you, we'll edit out the first 20 minutes because we actually did start the session early and went live before the top of the hour. And as we were getting geared up, we'll edit that so it can all be efficient as you view it again for the content.
Mhm.
Can you explain that paragraph about child and not child records with logical and physical?
Sorry, repeat that question.
Can you explain that paragraph with child pipeline records and the difference between logical and physical and what that means or what that looks like?
The paragraph in which paragraph?
So if you can look in questions, and I don't know if you can see it, it's, you know, you might do better if you look at it, but I see Chad was looking for you to comment on what he provided in the chat window. And you can expand your questions.
Let me see if I can pull that thing.
See it.
Hold on 1 second. In this window.
If you go right below the box where you can fill in the answer, that's where you can click and pull down to expand all the questions. It took me a little while to find out how to enlarge it so you can see
Oh, yeah. Okay.
the entire question.
Okay, I see a lot of people ask questions. Okay.
And that's from Chad Westall.
All right. The table containing a definition of pipeline. Okay, you read that. Chad. See the last one. Can you explain the difference between the logical and physical in child or no child pipeline records? So, continuous station network is the parent. Engineering station network is the child. You can have, again, going back to this slide, you'll have one parent and you can have two children. So if you have a forward stationing, back station, if you have equations, you would record that here in your engineering station network. You would have each time you have like an equation, it would be a separate route, right? So this would be like one forward. This might be a back stationing. So you would have, in this example, two routes, and then you would have one parent.
This is Jackie Smith. If I can maybe explain the pipeline table, you can also have there's a recursive relationship in the pipeline table, so that if you enter a pipeline, and you have the pipeline ID, and then you want to enter its route, you would enter a second record in the pipeline table, and the parent ID would be the pipeline ID of that first one. So that's another way to logically group the pipelines as well.
Okay, so is what that's saying is you either have to use the route or you have to use the self-referential relationship in the pipeline table, and that you cannot use both for parent-child? Is that what that's saying?
You could only use, your question is you can only use one, or
you can only use the pipeline ID field to tie. The parent pipeline ID is just giving you the reference up to the information that you might need when you aggregate the data for reporting.
Okay, so but when can you not use that? Is that when it's a physical pipeline? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. When you can't use that self-referential relationship in the pipeline table.
I don't know if there's a time you can't use it. It's just when you build the network, you use the pipeline ID field from that pipeline table. A pipeline table is really where you store all your information about the line. You know, the commodity, the operating type, operating status, transmission, flow line, that type of thing. And so that's where everything is for the pipeline. And so I'm not sure if that answered your question, but.
I have some other questions here that I'm now seeing in the chat. Someone asked, so the Centerline is not M-aware like continuous and engineering station? That's correct. That is correct. There is, if I were to, let me just double click here. There is no M value on this Centerline. There is an M value on engineering station network and continuous measure network, not on the Centerline. So if you wanted to use PODS 7 without APR and you don't want to use linear referencing, you would use Centerline. How can we get the PODS version? Jackie, do you know, or Kathy, the question is, it says, how can we get the PODS version? Is there any table for this or command for this where they could see what version they're on?
No, there's unless you populated the metadata tables with the version you're on, there isn't really one unless someone else, looks at it. You can usually tell.
Okay.
You mean like PODS 7 versus PODS 6 versus PODS 4, that type of thing? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, I believe this. And yes, correct, yes. PODS 7 versus PODS 6. I could tell you PODS 7, I believe, is the only one with engineering station network, continuous measure network, Centerline, calibration points. If you see those in your version, then you're in PODS 7. And someone asked, this is PODS 7, correct? Not 7.0.1. Correct. This is PODS 7, not 7.0.1.
And not PODS Lite, not the original PODS Lite either, correct? Because the PODS Lite was
correct.
Released. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yes, correct. Correct. Yeah. I think, let me see if there's any. Oh, in our catalog, how do you generate LRS networks? So you have to install the desktop version of APR. And once you do that, then you'll see this. Continuous measure. Is continuous measure always required, or can you configure one APR network feature? So when you use APR, it's going to populate continuous, continuous measure, not continuous station. Yes, it's always required, but you can make a match. So if your whole line, again, going back to here, let me go back really quick. I know we're ending the presentation soon, but if we go here, if this line is 100 feet, right, you may have two children or engineering station network or routes that are like 50 feet. So this is maybe 0 to 50, and this is 50 to 100. Or you can make a match. You can have two routes here, two separate routes in continuous measures, 0 to 50, 50 to 100, and then two routes here. It just depends how you want to set it up. There's just one more question. Does PODS 7 also have a red line feature class? You know what? I think I did see that. Jackie, is there a red line? I thought I saw that the other day.
Yes, I know. It's generated from when you generate the LRS. I'm pretty sure it's in there. If it's not, it's just generated if you use the Esri product.
Okay. Okay.
So it might not be in there natively.
I think those are all the questions that I saw here. Well, thank you, everyone. I feel free to email me with any questions separately after the class. I'm sorry if this was a little confusing. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties we had. I think that made it even more confusing because we had to stop and pause and had to explain things a different way. But thank you for your patience. And again, email me. Just email me, patricia.dolben@integritymapping.com. Email me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Patricia, I'd like to thank you for what you provided to the listeners today and the viewers. I think it was valuable. It's the kind of content that our members have been looking for, and they always ask for demonstrations. So while there was a couple glitches, I'll tell you, Jeff Allen, one of PODS board members, and he works for Esri, always says, you know, going live always, you know, provides some risk, but it also provides a ton of value. So that's what you gave us today. So I, you know, on behalf of the PODS board, thank you for the training that you provided today. I'll remind everybody this has been recorded, and it will be posted on PODS website as well as being sent to all of you. So I appreciate your attendance, and I see a lot of thanks coming in from our listeners to you today. So it was appreciated by everybody, Patricia. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.